So good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's first session as a part of our VACo virtual annual conference. We have a great session lined up for you today dealing with economic development and workforce development, particularly as it relates to coming out of the pandemic. My name is Chris McDonald. I serve as the Director of Government Relations here at the Virginia Association of Counties. I'm really pleased to kick off and help moderate this panel. First up this morning, we're very grateful to have Mr. Erik Johnston. For those of you who aren't familiar with Erik, Erik is the director of the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development, or DHCD for short, a position he has held since Governor Ralph Northam first appointed him to this role in January of 2018. In his capacity as director, Erik is responsible for the management and oversight of the agency, which provides community development, economic development, and housing program support to communities across the Commonwealth. DHCD also focuses on encouraging regional collaboration between localities and other key sectors and administers statewide building codes. In addition to his daily DHCD duties, Erik provides policy and legislative support to the Secretary of Commerce and Trade. He serves as an ex officio member of the Board of Commissioners for the Virginia Housing Development Authority and serves as the governor's state alternate for the Appalachian Regional Commission. Prior to this role, Erik served as a chief deputy at DHCD. He also served as the deputy policy director in Governor Terry McAuliffe's office. And of course, most notably for us, Erik previously served as the director of government affairs here at VACo. So Erik, thank you so much for being here this morning. We really look forward to your presentation and remarks.
Thank you, Chris. It's wonderful to be with everyone at VACo this morning. One of the highlights of my career was working with the VACo team and also the elected and staff officials from across the state. So it's really good to be with you this morning and hear great content for your conference throughout these couple of days in a virtual environment. So thanks for inviting me, and I'm going to talk about a couple things related to the economic recovery, and really I could sum up my presentation in both stabilization of the economy right now, but then also working on the long-term recovery. And so I know for us as state agencies and for the local leaders and your staff, they're on point with administering all the new resources from the federal government for the COVID relief funds, that there's so much of a push on the stabilization right now, both on the social services front, but on the business assistance front. But then at the same time, all of you are managing at the local, regional, and mega regional level the long-term recovery and ensuring that we come out of this pandemic stronger. And so I'm really glad that you're going to have Stephen Moret and hear some of his analysis later and see some of the trends. My goal is really to, as DHCD, being a funding entity, we receive resources from the state and federal government that really are all deployed through local partners, and our agency is all about partnering for better communities. So I'm going to try to give you a sense that many of you all are very familiar and utilizing throughout the pandemic of existing resources for assisting with small businesses and the economic short-term emergency response, and then also give you a sense of some of the tools available for the long-term recovery and some thoughts on how state, local, federal can work together to position your county, your region, and the state to be one of the best at taking advantage of the new world that exists in economic development and the new realities to make sure our regions and localities are positioned to start up new businesses. There's with disruptions like the pandemic, there's no greater time when new businesses start. Many businesses also struggle and fail during this time, and we're going to focus on trying to protect those together. But in addition, many new businesses start or become whole new entities, whole new efforts. So I'm going to give you a sense of some of those resources. And Governor Northam, Secretary Ball, they have been focused on that. There's also Megan Healy, the workforce director, and I'm not going to talk about many of the workforce programs, but there's a slew of efforts on retraining, retooling the workforce to position for the new jobs coming out of this pandemic and in this recovery. So, Chris, if you want to throw up the slides, I have some slides that I'm not going to read to you. I'm just going to give you a sense of a takeaway for some of the staff contacts and resources that are available. So next slide. Next slide. So I want to thank VACo for being one of the key champions for how essential broadband is for many years, way before the pandemic, and now everyone in the world realizes how essential broadband is. I know you have a session later today and to cover that in more depth. I've just thrown a couple slides to say that both on the broadband front, there's the long-term effort and then also the short-term recovery, pandemic-related effort. We're really pleased that the Governor and General Assembly did keep $49.7 million in the special session budget for the Virginia Telecommunications Initiative, that last mile broadband program, and counties have been at the forefront of being aggressive and partnering with their internet service providers, whether they be wireless, electric cooperatives, cable companies. They have been telephone cooperatives in aggressively pursuing these funds, and the increase there is going from 19 million a year to 49.7 million. But we have a total of 105 million in requests that the agency is reviewing, and we're looking to award those projects in early January. So it's only through showing the demand and for that hard work and active engagement at the local level that we're able to demonstrate to the General Assembly the need for these funds. So these are 18-month, projects typically take a year to 18 months to build out and develop. And we're very excited that there's a robust pipeline and that now DHCD has the state Virginia broadband office. The CIT efforts on planning and mapping are now merged as of this last July with the grant programs that DHCD administers. So we're bullish on the opportunity here, and also staffing up to have some assistance for localities as you apply for federal resources as well, because there are multiple federal resources out there available. So thank you for your efforts. If your locality has not yet updated their plans or worked with our staff recently, we want to be there to assist you in ensuring universal broadband access across the Commonwealth. Next slide. The other immediate emergency responses the governor made available up to $30 million in the Fast Access Broadband Program. And these are really broadband projects that can deploy and be spent by December 25th. Sorry, next slide. This is still on the VAJIP requirements. So for more information, you can go to that website there, Commonwealth Connect, virginia.gov. There's 12 million still available, so many counties and cities have moved quickly on this, but there is still funding available. So if you need more information on that, definitely recommend that you all look into that program. And I'll say that thank you to the leadership of many of the VACo members, that you all use some of that CARES funds that you received from the governor's office to begin some of these types of projects, and the governor basically gave an opportunity to plus up that amount to go further and get shovel ready projects done by the end of the year to help ensure we have broadband access to as many folks as possible, businesses and residents during the pandemic. Next slide.
We had a quick question before we go further from Ed Moret. How realistic are the efforts to use USDA Reconnect funds down at the state level to allow DHCD to manage Virginia broadband programs? We know Congressman Whitman had been pushing for this originally. Don't know if you have any intel on that.
Yeah, the governor and Chief Broadband Advisor Evan Feynman have both been supporting that bipartisan effort to give more of the federal funds that are out there for broadband as block grants to the states. and to help assist with more flexible state administered programs. I can't really tell you at this point how plausible that is. I think, like any of those efforts, it takes a while and many voices to keep championing that. We're really just focused on demonstrating that the program, the cost per passing and the effectiveness of this state program are much stronger than the federal results. So we're just trying to keep showing a model that works. So it's a good question, and I do know that there's been bipartisan ask on that to give some more flexibility for federal broadband dollars to go directly to the states.
Hey, this is Ron Peters from Dickinson County. I just sent something in chat, but it wasn't phrased as a question. I guess my question is, for that 30 million fast track, people are running into problems because they can't find a provider with the right materials to even act it within the deadlines, if I understood it correctly.
Yes, sir.
Possibility they're looking at expanding that?
It's a valid point you're raising. Unfortunately, right now, the federal deadline on those funds for the CARES Act, those COVID relief funds block granted to the states, they have to be spent by December 30, or by the end of this, December 30. So unfortunately, we would at the state level love to give more time on that, but it's just an impediment we have right now with the federal rules.
I understand that, but here's the thing. This is something that we all have been wanting for the last several years, and to push it like that, it's encouraging people to just get it to do some temporary stuff with the plans of coming in later and doing it the right way. And that's happening.
Well,
I just wanted to state that out there.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And with our team here, we're definitely there's multiple pots of money for broadband right now. There's the 50 million with the state funds, and we're planning to have a robust pipeline of that again next year. So we want to work with you on whatever project you have, whatever timeline, to try to help those come to fruition and get them there. Unfortunately, there's just so much demand. We don't have enough funds for all of it right now, but thanks to VACo and other stakeholders' efforts on the Commonwealth Connect coalition, at a couple of years ago, we were at $1 million in funds. So thanks. Those funds keep growing because of you all's leadership. Chris, any more questions on the broadband, or do you want me to keep going?
We'll move on from questions for right now. I know you've got a 10 a.m. hard stop, so we want to cover as much material as you can. But I know you'll have your email address as well as your team's email addresses for additional follow-up questions we don't get to.
Great, thanks. So the next program is the Community Development Block Grant Program, and that's yearly we fund 18 million in projects. This would be for rural counties and small towns and cities, because the large counties and cities receive these funds direct from HUD at the federal level. But we did receive extra funds that the VACo membership has been utilizing for the items you see here. Most counties have chosen to use it for small business relief and developing their own small business relief programs. But there's a whole bunch of examples of locally led efforts on pandemic response with those more flexible CDBG dollars. Next, and there's some contact information for our staff working on that. Next slide. The Go Virginia program, the board opened up the flexibility for using 14.6 million in funds for recovery and resilience efforts. And really the Virginia teams have been moving really quickly thanks to strong partnerships with counties and cities and planning districts. To the match waivers have been lowered given the fiscal impacts on the and your partners right now. So there's only a half match required on these particular funds, and also a waiver of some of the local match requirements. We've seen some amazing projects like the New River Valley focused on their health departments having strike forces to help with business reopenings or business situations relating to COVID. South Side, both of their regional economic development organizations, having a $1 million program to really assist existing businesses to stabilize with the technical assistance and services to help navigate through the pandemic. We've seen things like efforts for businesses to come together and create plans to retool manufacturing across the state with Gen Edge and try to help manufacturers across the state look at the new markets and potentials coming out of the pandemic to position our manufacturing to be strong. So I definitely would encourage folks that this is one of the best tools on a long term. There's both short-term funds, but also long-term funds to help with your recovery efforts and focus on the supporting businesses and positioning to attract new businesses with site development, with entrepreneurship efforts, and with workforce training in the pandemic. So really, this program is, as you all know, a couple years old, but it's really growing, and the amount of dollars getting out for really effective projects is growing exponentially. Next slide. The other thing I just wanted to mention is that housing is the 6th largest industry in Virginia, and the housing sector, thanks to local counties and cities with their local building departments, really kept the housing industry moving with remote inspections, with finding ways to keep the housing industry going through the pandemic and coming out actually with a lot of strong growth there. I know there's lots of lot of cost increases in that sector with lumber prices, etc. But I do want to make sure you're aware of the Housing Trust Fund going from $7 million in the existing budget base to $55 million annually, and those are for both construction loans to incentivize affordable housing developments, workforce housing, and also for homeless reduction grants. There's also the rent and mortgage relief program, which is really the Housing Trust Fund. Think of that as the long-term tool for housing recovery. Our RMRP, the rent and mortgage relief, is really another one of those emergency responses, and we have a statewide landlord application process and a local tenant-based application process to help stabilize housing during the pandemic. And it helps both the tenant and homeowner and their banking institution and landlord to come out and stabilize as folks lost jobs and then come back in. Next slide. We have a small but mighty team called our Community Revitalization Office, and that team works through the community business launch, enterprise zones, our Main Street efforts, Industrial Revitalization Fund. I really would encourage, even if you don't have a Main Street there or have not applied to have a Main Street, we have something called commercial district affiliates, and basically the tools and resources of this team, a lot of virtual and online learning, are really focused on helping commercial districts and business organizations rally together and help with the services and technical assistance to pull down federal dollars to thrive and in using online meal ordering, shared platforms, etc. So really encourage folks to take a look at the how to apply workshops coming up, and also look at the resources on their page of bringing a lot of national best practices on main streets, whatever that main street may look like, whether it's a rural corner commercial district, a larger district in a suburban county that spans a long corridor, to look at those resources. Next slide. Another short-term pandemic recovery response who's administered by the Small Business, SBSD, Small Business and Supplier Diversity. The rules have changed on that program so that additional businesses are eligible. Up to $100,000 is eligible for businesses, and there's, I believe, about 70 million at least available for that program. So encourage your departments to really get the word out there on the Rebuild Virginia opportunity to really help stabilize your small and medium-sized businesses. Next slide. So I've got a bunch of staff contacts for the different initiatives, our leadership there, and I'm gonna type my email address in the chat here.
And for the benefit of everyone watching, we will share these slides on our website as well, so you'll be able to find these contacts as well.
So that's my presentation. I just want to end by saying, you know, I gave a lot of just information. We're a funding agency, and we really believe in focusing on the outcome communities are trying to get to and working back to see what programs are available to assist. We have some community capacity builder staff that help with your work hand with your staff and local leaders to think about your vision for coming out of the pandemic recovery and how you can gain access to the resources for both the emergency assistance so desperately needed for our current economy and our current business owners, but also thinking about the long term and realizing that a lot's going to change with this pandemic, a lot of new opportunities, and those localities and regions and states that focus on both are going to be the best positioned to be stronger at the end of this. So thank you for your leadership. I can't thank enough the VACo team and your executive committee and just members for all the work you do. I know it's really hard times to be in public service and so much work to do, and I appreciate all you do to serve people in Virginia. Chris, I'll kick it back to you if folks have additional questions.
Sure. Erik, thank you so much for being here this morning. We know that you have a super tight schedule, so really appreciate your time, and more broadly, really appreciate your friendship and your partnership. I know I was on the phone with you until about 6 last night, and we'll do it again tonight. So we really appreciate you always being there as a good ally for local governments. I know you have a couple minutes for questions before you've got to scoot. We just had one more come into the chat. What controls for performance delivery does DHCD have over at VATI utility partners?
Sure. So we with those contracts, the contract was with actually between, as you know, those who have the grants between DHCD and the local government, and then there's a separate agreement between the local government and the internet service provider. So we do performance audits and make sure that what was promised in the application in terms of the number of passings and the speeds that are promised come to fruition, and a lot of that work is in partnership with the locality and monitoring to ensure that as you all are close to on the ground on that.
Do we have any other questions that we did not get to before we let Erik go for the day? There was one that came in a little bit earlier. Let me pull it back up. It kind of got buried in the chat.
Trying my thing to unmute. I was trying to ask a question, but I would love it if you could talk just for a second or two about new opportunities for new businesses or developing business with these grants and funds and all the things that are available. You know, some folks want to do a startup, and it'd be a very difficult time. So could you address that briefly? I would really appreciate that.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and that you've nailed the opportunity. Is that there's a lot of when you lose a job, you can sometimes turn your side gig into a full-time job, or your long dreamed of entrepreneurial opportunity. There's a couple of things on that one. Is that the Virginia Investment Partnership Authority was created by the General Assembly during last session, and their mission is in that space. They are working on they have multiple funds that help start up different size businesses. Also, small business and supplier diversity has resources available, loan funds and smaller grant funds in that space. The main resources we have at DHCD are through our community revitalization office. Our community business launch is one I would and that slide that shows the workshops and road shows in that space, I would recommend that as the resource to go to, that talks about some of the programs we manage, but then also some of our partner organizations. Another key partner are the community development financial institutions, Virginia Community Capitals, our statewide CDFI, and then I would say there's also opportunities for creating locally revolving loan funds through different federal sources. Some localities have used different federal sources, and we've helped them partner to develop revolving loan funds or micro enterprise funds. Our federal partners such as USDA have rural micro enterprise funds. So there's a gamut of resources out there to help in that space. Go Virginia is the other one. I would talk to your Go Virginia Regional Council. Most of the Go Virginia regions have done a study on their startup ecosystem, and they have plans and visions for what are the resources existing through your universities, through your small business development centers. Jody Keenan and the small business development centers are an excellent resource. And there was a recent Go Virginia grant that's helping them keep that network thriving and expanding in the recovery, because the demand on them has never been greater, because they're not only helping folks navigate and stay alive, they're helping people start new businesses. So I would recommend your team talking with your Go Virginia region and asking about their regional entrepreneurship initiative plan, asking about what opportunities exist in that space already. And that study was supposed to identify the gaps in your region too, because there are gaps in various regions on the types of capital, seed funds, angel funds, loan and grant funds available to help the different types of small businesses. But I think you nailed that question is what I would recommend all of us be at, including our state, asking ourselves about what we can do to make sure that during a major disruption like this, one of the biggest opportunities is new entrepreneurship initiatives. And what better way to help your community than help existing residents of your community turn their dream into a business reality that can help your economy and help stabilize and grow our economy.
Thank you, Erik. I feel like that is very, very important to us in our community. I'm sure it is all across, because a lot of folks today are trying to reinvent themselves because they're forced to reinvent themselves. And anything you can add when you send that post out in regard to, because you're so quick going through listing this and this and this and this, it's hard sometimes for us to keep up with all of it. But to me, that's the heart of what's going on. When the heartbreak is seeing so many folks that are out of work right now and they don't have options. And this creates those opportunities and options, helps us to be a stronger, better community. And I appreciate your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I want to say on that one, definitely there's the list in this PowerPoint of the resources, but more importantly, just reach out to our team. We have community capacity developers. I'm happy for any of you to reach out to me and direct you to our team to walk through kind of what challenges you're having and what you're trying to do in that space. And we can try to set up a call for your team to just look at the outcome you're looking at and see what resources are available. That's our job. I mean, we're as an agency, we're supposed to be partnering to work hand in hand with your staff and your leadership to think through that. So don't worry about the alphabet soup of state agency programs. Just just come and have a Zoom call or Google Meet with us, and we can try to help think through what's available.
Thank you.
Well, that brings us to about 10 o'clock. Erik, thank you again for being here today. This is all extremely helpful information. And again, we really appreciate not just your help now, but your continuing help and partnership. So we know you got to run, but thank you again for being here. We look forward to hopefully seeing you soon.
Thank you so much. Great being with everybody. Have a great rest of your conference.
So next up, we have some brief updates from our very own Joe Lurch, who's going to speak a bit about the kind of renewable energy revolution that's happening here in Virginia and what that means for economic development, in particular what renewable energy means for your localities. So I will turn it over to you, Joe.
Thanks, Chris. I know we're waiting on Steve, so I think this is a nice segue. And I think, Don, you hit it right. It's about reinventing ourselves as a Commonwealth. And there are some opportunities coming with the change in how we're doing energy in Virginia. It's coming both by land and by sea. We're going to see a significant amount of utility scale solar on the ground. Dominion, in a most recent posting to the SEC, estimate is going to be 25% greater than the area of the county of Fairfax. We're also seeing a nuclear strategic plan that's going to be coming out soon by the Commonwealth that was asked for by the General Assembly. But probably the greatest opportunity we're seeing is in offshore wind. And we had an economic development and planning steering committee just recently, and Christy Morton, who I can see on here, gave us a little update. And what we're going to see with offshore wind is billions of dollars invested to create that resource. And it creates an economic opportunity in Virginia, particularly in developing the supply chain. One of the things I'm going to put in the chat, it's from the Hampton Roads Alliance. And as Christy said, they look at this as an opportunity, not just for the Hampton Roads, but for all regions of Virginia. And so they're going to be doing a business and supplier outreach by each region. There's going to be 5 different events online in December. And like I said, I'll put this in the chat. And I think that's something that all y'all should take a look at. One of the things that Christy pointed out is we have such a great resource in the port, and the ability to move these turbines, not just in Virginia, but up and down the East Coast, positions Virginia extremely well in this. So I'm going to put that in the chat. I know, Chris, we're waiting on Mr. Moret, but I can also take any questions while we're waiting for everyone.
Yeah, does anybody have any questions broadly or specifically?
I can say in terms, Chris, of thinking about just a little bit about utility scale solar, it has been stated in the public interest by the General Assembly that we're going to see close to 1,600 megawatts of solar on land, but also 3,100 megawatts of energy storage. A large part of that will be chemical batteries, but also down in Southwest Virginia, pump storage, which is another opportunity, economic development opportunity. One of the things that we're going to be looking at is obviously you're going to see a lot of construction jobs, I think, as these things go. But there's also going to be, I think, opportunities for training the workforce. I know that MDVCA, which I won't even go to the acronym, it's kind of an alphabet soup, but it's kind of the Mid-Atlantic industry rep for solar, utility scale solar, is doing some opportunities in workforce training in Southern Virginia, and we'll probably be doing more of those. So that's another opportunity for workforce development. I will say a little bit about the nuclear strategic plan. We are looking forward to that coming with the Virginia Nuclear Energy Consortium is going to be looking at that. That date has not been scheduled yet, but we think sometime in December they'll be meeting and we'll have a first look at that. I think one of the things that we're going to be looking at is it just maintaining our current nuclear assets, which, it's about roughly 30% of the energy production in Virginia, and that's carbon free, or is it going to be building on maybe some smaller modular nuclear units, creating opportunities here in Virginia as well?
This is Jerry Booth. I had a quick question.
Sure, Jerry, go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. I had a hard time getting home. I apologize. You mentioned battery storage. Has anyone looked into what impact that's going to have on the local waste streams, any waste products or impacts?
Sure, that's a good question because, Jerry, this is all new, and the batteries are a lot different than the panels in that you're going to find some heavy metals, in particular, manganese, you're going to have lithium, you're going to have cobalt. I think the key for the Commonwealth and for the counties is coming up with an environmental review before these things are approved, and more importantly, a decommissioning. So in other words, if these things go belly up or these batteries need to be replaced, where do you place these things, and is there going to be a financial surety for that to happen? I can tell you, Jerry, that the State Corporation Commission has a draft rule out for battery storage, and they do have environmental review on that. But that's a really good question, and we're definitely going to be monitoring that. I think also for something for localities to think about is there is a fire hazard with these things. There was a case in Arizona recently outside of Phoenix where one of these things caught fire, and the first responders came and they were not aware of the situation, but then there was an explosion. And so part of what we're seeing is the industry stepping up and training our local fire departments, particularly the volunteer fire departments, on how do you deal with these, because they're a whole different animal. So that's a great question. I also see that Stephen will be on soon. Christy just sent us a note. Thank you, Christy. I don't know if there's any other questions. And if we're still waiting on Stephen, if there's questions, maybe even, I don't want to put Christy on the spot, but she did a great job pointing out to us some of the opportunities. And I know that she's kind of been the lead at VAJIP on the renewable energy opportunities for economic development in the Commonwealth.
A quick comment, if nobody else has one at the moment. That is that.
First, then we'll go with Ann.
Okay. One thing that North Carolina has is with a lot of manufacturers, businesses, and producers, they have a pre-fire emergency action plan. And I think that's something we should look into statewide, to where the local fire marshal or fire chiefs come in, they work with the business, and they help establish pre-fire emergency action plans so that if something happens, they know what's going on at the facilities. They're prepared to move in, and there's a good communication between the two. That's just a thought.
Thank you, John. I'll look for that, but if you can send us maybe anything with a web link on what North Carolina has, that would be great.
I'll see if I can copy some of what we've got and send it to you.
Sure. All right, Ann. You had a question?
So thanks. I'll follow up on the chemicals and yes, I do. Can you hear me?
Yes. You're coming in a little garbled, but go ahead.
Okay. Now I'm back. Okay, sorry. So my question is, what are the teeth going to be regarding this environmental, especially with the batteries? So I hope the SEC is going to do something serious, like have a bond or something that's required that will provide the resources to take care of these things. And also, as we noticed with the fracking discussions where we had the agency of the state who is responsible for exploitation of resources all of a sudden being assigned the task of protecting the environment, those two things did not work well together. So we weren't able to get disclosure of chemicals involved in that whole process. So I do hope that there'll be a lot more focus on the pre-planning, as Mr. Rosie suggested, to be able to get disclosure of what's really involved to protect our first responders as well as our community budgets when things go badly. Thank you.
And that's a good point. That's definitely something I think the state, we'd be looking for them for some leadership on this. But I remind everybody, with your land use authority, you do have the ability to require decommissioning plans for these types of facilities, and you can get surety through that. So that's an important tool that you have in your toolbox. And I do know that Sussex County recently approved a plan for battery storage. And so that might be a great place to go, because I think they got some surety out of that, and it'd be a good resource. All right, I don't know if Mr. Moret is on yet. We can take a couple.
I am here. I'm so sorry. I think I clicked on the wrong link initially.
No problem. I will mute myself and have you take over. Thanks.
Stephen, we know you had a very busy schedule today, and that you were literally coming from one engagement to this one. Yes. So we really thank you. We won't parse words or take any more time, but we'll jump right into it. So we're extremely fortunate to have with us today Mr. Stephen Moret. As most of you already know, Stephen serves as the president and CEO of the Virginia Economic Development Partnership, or VADP, a position he has held since 2017. At VADP, Stephen has collaborated with state, regional, and local partners to craft an ambitious vision focused on transformational goals, including accelerating employment growth, enabling every region to grow, and moving back to the top of national business climate rankings. He's led Virginia's successful state and local team bid for Amazon HQ2 and is launching a world-class custom workforce program along with the Virginia Community College system. Prior to joining VAJIP, Mr. Moret served as the chief executive of the Baton Rouge Area Chamber and the Louisiana Department of Economic Development, as well as the LSU Foundation and its real estate development arm. Stephen, thank you so much for taking the time out of your crazy hectic schedule. We really appreciate you being here today, and we'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much. Let me see if I can pop up my slides here. Can you all see that okay?
We sure can.
Okay, great. Wonderful. Well, great to be with you. And let me just say, what a pleasure it has been working with the counties across Virginia and working with VACo in particular the last few years. One of the things that I think Christy Morton, our VP of External Affairs and the former head of the Virginia Rural Center, is with us this morning. She's been such a great addition to our team. And we've really tried to work hard to get closer to our counties and get closer to VACo, and I hope you all feel that way. I would welcome, by the way, today, either during my remarks or after any comments or questions that you may have for me. But what we're really focused on in VDP right now is economic recovery. Obviously, the governor and his team, I think, have done a great job managing the public health crisis, I should say, along with all the the first responders and healthcare providers and so forth. But as we start to get toward the prospect of widespread vaccine availability in 2021, we think we need to shift some of our energy toward economic recovery and making sure that we can get back to full strength as quickly as possible. And as you'll see here shortly, that's particularly important for Virginia's counties, many of which are obviously in many of them in rural areas that are expected to take longer to recover. So let me see if I can, here we go. Yep. Okay. So first of all, let's talk about where we are. I think you all know that when we hit the pandemic, it's been a big negative impact for us, although not as bad as originally feared. What you're looking at on this slide is the change in total employment from pre-pandemic through August. So statewide, our total employment is still down about 6.3%. If you just look at the change in the unemployment rate, it looks a little bit better than that. But the reason that we like to look at it this way is it kind of shows the full picture. The unemployment rate really only includes people who are not working and are looking for work. We have a lot of Virginians that have been negatively impacted by the reduced availability of childcare. And so that's really had a downward impact on our workforce participation rate. And of course, in addition to the drop in jobs, we've seen people that had second jobs lose the second jobs, people that were full-time had to go to part-time. So while overall we've done better than the rest of the country, we have had a significant negative impact. And I know this has put a lot of pressure on many of the counties in Virginia. But this gives you a sense of the range. And by the way, the reason that the losses have kind of ranged by region mostly has to do with two big factors. One is the proportion of the the local and regional employment that's associated with those sectors that were hardest hit, like hospitality and retail. That obviously varies quite a bit across the localities and even the regions. And secondly, particularly in some of the smaller rural regions like Southern Virginia and Southwest Virginia, the impact of a small number of large manufacturers that had layoffs did have an impact. But overall, we've made it about half the way back. As we look toward recovery, though, this was one of the key slides I wanted to share with you. This is not VDP's forecast, but it's really a forecast by Moody's Analytics. They do forecasts for every state and region and even localities across the country. They believe that Virginia will not get back to full employment until late 2023. Now, we're hopeful to be faster than that. But the one place we agree with them is that they believe, and we think it's correct, that rural localities will take longer to get back. So as you see here, they expect Virginia as a whole to get back by 2023, back to our pre-COVID employment total, but for rural Virginia to take almost to the end of 2025. So our goal in Virginia our goal at VDP, and I know a goal that we share with others across the Commonwealth, is to accelerate both of those lines, to try to get back to full employment quicker than what's currently anticipated, and in particular to try to get back to full employment in our rural and smaller metro areas more quickly as well. And so much of what I'm going to talk about today is some of the things that we see as ways to move forward with that. As you look at those forecasts, looking from late last year through 2024, again, this is Moody's Analytics forecast, you see some places still in negative territory, largely the more rural parts of Virginia. And so that, again, just reinforces how important it is that we make economic recovery a top priority and try to cultivate as many new job opportunities as we can, either existing companies getting back to full strength or attracting new investment to Virginia, really both of those as we go forward. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what we see as some of those growth opportunities. We've spent a lot of time thinking about what are things that we can do to move Virginia forward. And there's really four big opportunities that we see coming out of the pandemic. One, this is great news for counties, capturing manufacturing, reshoring, and new supply chain opportunities. For a variety of reasons, companies are looking to de-risk their supply chains. We expect they're going to want to get closer to where their customers are. That's going to mean new opportunities for counties across Virginia, but we do have to make sure that we address some of our competitiveness issues that I'll talk about in a moment. Second, accelerating digital Virginia. Virginia was already one of the leaders in the country in the tech sector. We see big growth opportunities in cloud computing, software development, data centers, autonomous systems, cybersecurity, and other areas. While counties haven't always been necessarily among the biggest players in this, we are seeing more activity in smaller areas. We're seeing more data center activity outside of the traditional strengths in Northern Virginia. So this really is, to some extent, we think, a statewide opportunity. Another opportunity for counties is telework. Now, we still don't know quite how big this is going to be, but we do think in general, remote work is going to become much more common than it was before the pandemic. Now, most of it we do think will be hybrid, as in folks working partly from home, for folks working partly in the office. So those folks are obviously not going to be generally relocating. But we do think a significant portion will be an increase in permanent remote work. That is a place where Virginia is going to be very well positioned to benefit. According to Forbes, we have the highest quality of life in America. We've got a beautiful landscapes. There are counties across Virginia. We have great weather. We have great public schools, one of the best higher ed systems in the world. I mean, there's so many reasons to live here that for those folks that have the ability to work anywhere, we think a large portion of them are going to choose to locate in Virginia. We got a lot of work we're doing right now to try to better understand how big is this going to be, what kinds of folks might be looking to move, and what sorts of things might they be interested in as they think about moving. And by the way, many of them will be Virginia natives that will be coming back. We've already seen some folks that had gone out to the West Coast working in Silicon Valley for Google and other big tech companies that are getting more flexibility and have decided to move back. So again, hard to say exactly how big this is going to be, but we think it'll be material. Finally, and this is really important, and I think we ought to be talking more about in the recovery, is reskilling. Many people will not only not be able to go back to their previous job, many of them will not be able to go back to their previous occupation. This won't be the majority, but it will be tens of thousands of Virginians that will need to get reskilled. Fortunately, Virginia already has a range of programs that are well positioned to address this. The Fast Forward program with the Virginia Community College System, which has now been enhanced with the Virginia Ready initiative that Glenn Youngkin and others have put together. We've also got the Virginia Talent Accelerator program I'll talk about, VAJIP, and the Governor's G3 initiative. So big picture, these are the four big opportunities. And I wanted to just touch on the specific programs that kind of go after these. These are the things that we're going to be advocating for, and I think you'll see most of these moving forward coming out of the next General Assembly session, or certainly hopeful they will. First is programs that offer reskilling to people that's directly connected to new high-wage job creation. So the Virginia Talent Accelerator program, the newest major workforce program in Virginia that VDP launched a couple of years ago with the governor's support and the General Assembly support. It's quickly become one of the top programs in the country, as I'll talk more about momentarily. The Virginia Jobs Investment Program, or VAJIP, that many of your counties have already made use of. Both of those will help create thousands of jobs over the next few years, a large portion of which will be in counties. We've also got community college programs, the Fast Forward initiative. Hopefully most of you are familiar with that. What you may not be familiar with is the new Virginia Ready initiative that's providing additional dollars to completers of those programs. So we think that combination will be really powerful in helping people to quickly reskill to get higher wage jobs. And then, of course, the G3 initiative that was in the governor's budget but was unallotted because of the budget challenges. We hope that that'll be coming back. A few other areas that are important: international trade plan. We see as a high impact, both short-term and long-term implementation of that. So we're hopeful that we'll get funding to implement more of that plan in the next year. Site development, this is super important for counties. We're going to talk more about that momentarily. Both the state and localities in general need to step up to the plate a bit more. The state in particular, because we really have not been a significant investor historically. Rural broadband, we should all give great thanks to the governor and the General Assembly that have really been making transformational increases in funding for rural broadband. We now have the prospect of near ubiquitous broadband coverage within 7 to 8 years. That'll not only help with the recovery, at least those that will be developed in the next 2 or 3 years, but also just dramatically expand access to education, to telehealth, to jobs, and so many other opportunities. And finally, marketing Virginia. We've really got to ramp up what we're doing with marketing to tell the story of our counties and our regions across the Commonwealth. We've been making progress there, but there's more work left to be done. So let me talk a little bit about talent solutions, because this has really become the single most important factor driving economic development and location decisions. VAJIP has 3 programs that we offer. I mentioned VAJIP. That's the one that is basically grants to companies that are creating jobs. That helps to offset the cost of reskilling and retraining efforts. You've also got the newer program, the Virginia Talent Accelerator program. This is a world-class custom workforce initiative. I'll talk more about that shortly. Probably the most notable project you may be aware of is the Morgan Olson project. I think that was their very first project, and the company executives just raved about the impact of this program. That project is, you may recall, the IKEA facility had closed in Southern Virginia, facing the loss of roughly 300 jobs. They've already got around 400 now, less than a year later. Just a wonderful success story, on their way to more than 700. But this program eventually will be doing projects all across Virginia, and we're going to see most of those are going to be in counties. So you're going to be getting to know this program if you haven't gotten to know it yet. And then finally, strategic talent solutions. Think about the Tech Talent Investment Program. If you've heard about that, it's $1 billion investment in computer science education. You may be aware of the Virginia Tech Innovation Campus that's going to Alexandria, but most of the money is actually being spent outside of Northern Virginia to expand institutions across the Commonwealth. James Madison University, UVA, Virginia Tech, ODU, VCU, our HBCUs, a whole range of institutions and community colleges participating in that. I mentioned the Talent Accelerator program. This is, imagine a SWAT team of experts that helps companies with fully customized, rapidly deployed workforce solutions, everything from recruitment and screening of talent to development and delivery of fully customized workforce training. It's just amazing what they can do with recruitment, with foundational skills, process and task specific training, automation technologies, organizational development. It's an amazing program. Once we all get out of this pandemic era, we'd love to invite VACo and its members to take a tour of the Experience Center that we've set up to really showcase the capabilities of this program in Richmond. And then, of course, the Virginia Jobs Investment Program. Hopefully most of you are familiar with that. It's been around for many, many years. It's the most commonly utilized incentive program that we have. I mentioned that we wanted to create the best custom workforce program in the country. Prior to just a few years ago, Virginia was often not ranked in the top 10 for workforce development. 2 years ago, we got to number 7 in both of the major rankings. Since then, we moved up to number 4 and number 3 in the top rankings. So we believe that we're on track, assuming we get the funding to complete a statewide expansion in the next year, the next fiscal year, I should say. We think we're on track to become number 1 or 2 in the country by 2023. That is our goal, and we're making great progress toward that. I mentioned VAJIP. That team is serving hundreds of companies every year, working with 78 localities, with the most recent count of projects we're working on in FY20. These typically a relatively high-wage job, high-wage jobs, $26 per hour is the average. We reimbursed 3,800 jobs last year. So wide utilization in counties across the Commonwealth. let me shift gears and talk about international trade for a moment. This is a really, really important area for Virginia. We have the best trade development team in America, but it is a team whose services are heavily oversubscribed. So we have a lot of companies that want to make use of what we're doing. We just don't have enough people to do that. So that's one of the things that's envisioned in the international trade plan, is to dramatically expand those programs. Our economy is strongly connected to exports. Exports in Virginia support more than 257,000 jobs in Virginia. Nearly 30% of our job growth was driven by exports, or economic growth was driven by exports. The last time they did a comprehensive study a few years ago, $2 billion Virginia exporters contributed in tax revenues to the Commonwealth. So it's a super important area. Part of what we're envisioning in the trade development plan is to take our exports per capita, where we currently really underperform, roughly 40th in the country. We want to get to 20th, and that would involve a tremendous increase in exports, which would mean a lot more sales for small and medium-sized businesses across our counties, across the Commonwealth. We serve through our trade development programs more than 300 companies every year. The average firm has about 7.9 million in international sales. The strong majority of the companies we serve are small and medium-sized enterprises. We have folks located in every region of the Commonwealth, serving companies all across Virginia. The companies enrolled in our programs have about 49,000 jobs. And again, we're doing all kinds of great work with them. Now, let me hit on something that's very important for counties in Virginia, and that is site preparedness. I know most of you are interested in attracting more manufacturing projects or distribution projects. You need to know that the most common reason in most years, either number one or two every year, a most common reason that we lose projects is another state simply has a better prepared site available more quickly than Virginia. It's not about taxes or quality of life or logistics or even incentives. Prepared sites is the biggest gap that we have to cultivating more manufacturing opportunities in the Commonwealth. I mean, think about advanced manufacturing, aerospace opportunities, data center sites, food and beverage processing, wood products. All these things, at least for new investments, typically require new sites. Over just the last few years, we were eliminated for 65 projects at least that involved 19,000 jobs and $5 billion in investment because we didn't have a prepared site or buildings. This is super important as we think about the future. Thanks to the Virginia General Assembly and the governor, we did get funding to characterize all of our identified development sites. We worked with more than 100 localities, most of them counties across the Commonwealth, to characterize every identified development site of 25 acres or larger in Virginia, at least those that the communities wanted to characterize, which was nearly all of them. What we found, however, was that more than 90% are not market ready. So most of them, the vast majority of them, even if a company said, I like this region, I like this community, would not select that community because those sites aren't ready. So it's super important. The good news is we've got the most sophisticated understanding that we've ever had of our site preparedness, not just at a macro level, but down to the individual sites. That does help us market the sites, but it also does point out to us where the gaps are, that need to be closed. And we've shared all those site reports with the participating localities. We're already getting some traction. This kind of shows you what it looks like. This is every identified development site in Virginia plotted on a map. These are just the ones that are 25 acres and larger that went through, the 466 sites that went through our site characterization process. The ones that are in green are the only ones that are market ready, that are competitive. Anything that's blue or gray is almost certain to get eliminated every time it's considered by a company. So working together, our goal is to get matching dollars where your localities can participate, your counties can participate, along with state matching dollars, and in some cases Go Virginia funds as well, to be able to get these sites to a greater level of preparedness. And to be clear, we're not talking about necessarily building roads or rail spurs or lots of high cost infrastructure. What we're really talking about is getting all the due diligence done, eliminating all the sources of uncertainty. If we need rights of way for future utilities, getting that addressed, getting any infrastructure designed such that if a company does choose a location in Virginia, they know they can move forward quickly and with predictability. That's what we're talking about. It's I believe, the best designed site development program in America. We just need the funding to be able to move it forward. Fortunately, the governor did have, and the General Assembly included $12.5 million in the FY21 budget, but because of the pandemic, that got unallotted along with just about everything else. So we're hopeful as we get into FY22 that could be incorporated back into the budget and be a big part of helping drive economic recovery. Let me talk about our response to COVID-19 a little bit. There's a whole range of things that we've done. We worked with companies to acquire additional PPE. We've reached out to literally thousands of companies for both COVID-related opportunities as well as other growth opportunities kind of coming out of the pandemic. We've been a big part of the Economic Crisis Strike Force led by Secretary Ball and his team, working with a dozen other state agencies to help ensure that the governor and all of our state leaders have a good understanding, a robust understanding of what's going on with economic impact and what we can do to move toward the future and really move toward recovery. We've submitted an EDA grant that we're hopeful we'll get a good answer on in the next few weeks to identify new growth opportunities for our regions across Virginia. And as I mentioned earlier, we're also working on telework to try to get a better sense of the size and character of that so we can go after that as well. Virginia, of course, has done a lot of positive things. These are just a few examples of what the Commonwealth has done, from the Economic Crisis Strike Force, broadband dollars from the CARES Act funding, the Rebuild Virginia Fund from the CARES Act funding, Virginia Ready, Go Virginia has done a whole series of grants related to this. Everyone has been trying to really collaborate and find ways to help encourage recovery and also help businesses get through this. There's lots of things that we're doing with local governments. Hopefully you're now also all getting our Virginia Economic Review magazine. To be clear, the primary audience for this is corporate America and site consultants outside Virginia, but it's also a great way for people inside Virginia to understand how we're marketing the Commonwealth. The most recent issue is this cover story here on aerospace, aviation, and unmanned systems, assets across the Commonwealth. We do a detailed quarterly partner report on our business development activity with the top county economic development person in every county in Virginia. We've been doing the Impact ED sessions with VITA that I think many of you have participated in. We're also offering introductions to economic development and ways to help folks just engage for those counties that have not yet gotten fully involved with economic development. I know many of you do not have a dedicated person, and so that's a challenge, I know, to be able to do that. One of the things that we've been spending a lot of effort on that you're going to learn a lot more about in the near future is our local and regional competitiveness initiative. This has been a big project, the most ambitious in the country, to really help benchmark what we're doing at the local and regional levels to help our locality partners understand how your economic development efforts compare to best practices, whether the funding is sufficient to be able to achieve the goals that you're setting out to do, and just what some of those best practices are. So we're going to be distributing that in the next several weeks, and I hope it'll be a really useful resource for you. There's a whole process. I won't go through all the details here, but a big process that we've gone through to get input from some of the top economic development folks in not just Virginia, but nationally as well. And again, that'll be coming out in the near future. We're going to have a report for every locality that participated in the survey associated with that will include how you compare to other localities like you in Virginia. So localities, we've kind of grouped folks into not just different size categories, but also whether a county is within a large region like a Northern Virginia, a smaller metro like a Roanoke region, or a small largely rural region like a Southern Virginia, let's say, for example. Again, I'm hoping that will be really helpful to all of you. And those reports will be coming out in the near future. And then we're going to try to make more resources available to provide input and guidance and feedback to folks as we get into 2021. Those are just a few examples of the work we're doing right now. With that, I will stop and would be delighted to take any questions you all may have for me or suggestions. Let me just say again how much we appreciate our collaboration with VACo's leadership team. We've had a great dialogue on a whole range of issues, in particular General Assembly type things, but also a variety of economic development things. We've been very grateful that we've been able to share some of what we're doing. And I'm forgetting the name of the publication, but VACo's publication that goes to all of you. And of course, we work daily with your economic development staff, and we appreciate the great work that they do as well. Thank you.
Stephen, thank you again so much for joining us this morning. As I noted earlier, I know that you run a pretty tight schedule, so we really appreciate you carving out some time for us today, and certainly appreciate just consistent aid and always being an open book and open resource for us. We do have a couple of questions that have come in via email to us. The first one I'll ask, unsurprisingly, broadband is at the forefront of most of our members' minds, especially today. We've heard a lot of different talk about it. So a question came in asking, what speeds are business prospects looking for, and how important is affordability in terms of telemedicine or workforce development?
Gosh, that's a good question. We don't get asked very often about business speeds. I would tell you that in our experience, the vast majority of the time, broadband is not an obstacle in attracting a significant new business location to Virginia. Partly because even in the kind of more rural parts of Virginia, there are areas that have broadband access. Or can get it, relatively quickly if it's a larger project. I can't recall the specific speed minimums. I just know it's rarely been an issue, but I'd be happy to follow up on that question. Affordability is absolutely huge. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because it's not just a question of getting, physical access to broadband. It's also affordability of that. And so I think as we go forward in Virginia, I suspect what you'll see, Chris, is that there will be certainly first and foremost getting access out there, but I think we're going to see more energy over time thinking about the affordability of that access as well. But I will try to follow up with you on the minimum speed question. I know we know it, I just don't know off the top of my head.
I appreciate that. I believe my colleague Jeremy Bennett got an email from one of our members or a question via email from one of the members.
Yes, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Stephen. We're getting a lot of emails in on this presentation, so it's really exciting. But Stephen, you are the co-chair of the Back to Virginia, Back to Work Virginia Task Force, yes, which is an effort spearheaded by the Virginia Early Childhood Foundation, examining recommendations and long-term solutions to childcare. And VACo, of course, is also a member of that task force, and really exciting work going on there. And just wondering if you take a second to comment on the importance of childcare, both as a way of recovering economically from COVID, but also the long-term economic implications of a more robust childcare system to the state.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that question. And we've really appreciated Dean's involvement and VACo's involvement in that effort. It's a very difficult issue. The U.S. in general is just really behind in childcare. And when you look at Virginia nationally, we have, without question, either the best or the second best higher ed system in the country. We have easily the best public schools in the South, roughly fourth best in the country. But childcare and early childhood education is a gap that we really have not closed yet. Most states haven't either, to be clear, but it's just hugely important. Historically, I kind of thought of it primarily in education terms, and it is very important in terms of helping kids get off on the right foot, but it's also super important for workforce participation as well. In fact, part of what's driving this persistent unemployment and also people dropping out of the workforce right now is that childcare availability is dramatically less, than it was prior to the pandemic. So our task force, has been certainly thinking about coming out of the recovery, but our big focus has been, how do we move toward a more ambitious future for Virginia when we think about early childhood and childcare in particular? And the goal that we are going to put forward, that we hope the governor and the General Assembly and you all and others will embrace with us, is for Virginia to set a goal that by 2030, we would have affordable childcare available to every Virginian. Now, obviously, that's a big, ambitious goal. It's going to take a lot of work by a lot of different stakeholders to get there. And we're not, while we are offering a number of thoughts about how we would get from point A to point B, we're not, we don't envision this as something that General Assembly would pass, this spring, but rather something that we perhaps could embrace the goal, the long-term aspiration, and then start to take measured steps to get from here to there. And what we should remember is that while there will be a significant cost involved in it, it will also have tremendous positive benefits for economic growth because of, in particular, workforce participation, but also improvements in education outcomes at every level. So I really do believe it would be transformational. And I think as we think about the future of Virginia, the way that we are going to lead in this country is to lead on talent, to be the best state in America for education, for educational attainment, for talent development. And this is the biggest gap that we have to close to get there, not just childcare, but also early childhood in general.
Thank you very much.
Another question has arisen in the chat regarding site readiness. For the programs supporting site readiness, is redevelopment considered, or is it only greenfield? Context, of course, is would repurposing well-located retail malls qualify, as they might be a great option?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So really, we're doing a variety of things with site development. So the Virginia Business Ready Site Program, that particular program is just focused on sites. But in our strategic plan, we are envisioning, it's not as developed yet, but we are envisioning having a building program as well. Many of you that have been around for a long time know that VDP actually used to have a shell building program that ultimately had quite a bit of success, although some of the buildings did take a while, to get into commerce. I do think the idea of repurposing retail is super important, because I think if this pandemic has really accelerated the transition to e-commerce and Amazon and all the other companies that are doing business in that space. I think there will be a future for retail, but I do think there's a very reasonable chance that the total retail footprint is going to be smaller in the future, even post full recovery than it is now. And so thinking about alternative uses for that space, I think makes a lot of sense. And that's an area I think you're going to see VDP place more focus in the future. But at this point, we certainly have put the vast majority of our focus on site preparedness, mostly because that's really the biggest gap that we face right now.
Another question that I had messaged earlier, you mentioned the importance of marketing. And I know that from my own perspective or my own experience, I've heard you reference marketing and the importance of it, dozens of times in a lot of different contexts. So I was wondering if you could speak to the importance of marketing at a local or regional level, in particular right now where there may be some tension as to where to allocate dollars since revenues are tightened and budgets are a little bit more restricted.
Yes, absolutely. Well, marketing is super important. In fact, until a few years ago, Virginia actually had a zero marketing budget for economic development. In fact, when I first got here, I remember people would complain, like, why is the state so focused on, marketing Fairfax? I said, no, that's Fairfax marketing itself. And the state doesn't have any marketing dollars for economic development. So fortunately, we have gotten some support for a basic marketing budget over the last few years. We are doing a variety of things to market Virginia and its regions. And one of the things you may or may not have noticed is we're very careful to make sure that we're marketing every region of Virginia, because obviously it's a very diverse state, and we want to make sure that we're not just looking at the urban crescent, let's say. But it's very important. The state needs to do more. We're heading in the right direction, but we need to do more. I think the second most important is the regional economic development organizations. Certainly those localities that have dollars that can do marketing their own, I think that's helpful. But I really think focusing on marketing the region and being a partner and a funder of whatever regional economic development organization represents your area is probably the most efficient way to focus on the marketing piece. Now, you do need certainly at least some level of economic development staff at the local level. I know that's really hard to do, especially for the very small localities. But having at least one person that's focused on that full time is really critical. For the bigger localities, more certainly makes sense. But I think participating in the regional economic development organization for most localities will be the best way to really focus on the marketing piece.
I appreciate those thoughts. So it's about 10:45, which means we're kind of coming to the end of our session before our next one. So first, Stephen, thank you so much for being here today. Again, we really, really appreciate the insights and continuing help. We got some feedback too, but wanted to turn it over to you for any last thoughts or last remarks.
Absolutely. Chris, thank you again for having me. I just want to thank again Dean Lynch and everybody in the VACo team. It's been a great collaboration. We've had some really substantive dialogue over the years. And, one thing I hope that you all hear from me every time I talk with you is how much we value our partnership with you, but also your feedback and suggestions. So my email address is just my last name, Moret @vedp.org. That's Moret @vedp.org. If we can help you in any way, or if you have feedback for us, complaints, whatever communication we would value. If you'd like to be on our email list, let me know that. We're trying to do the best we can, not just to drive forward economic development, but be good collaborators and communicators as well. And VACo is one of our most important partners in that regard. So thank you so much, Chris and Dean and everybody on the VACo team.
Thank you again, Stephen and Christy, and to the rest of your team. We really appreciate it. With that, we will wrap this session. We have about a 15-minute break before our next session begins. That is going to be on the future of education, featuring Dr. Deborah Burgesson, Dr. Keith Kerrigan, and Mike Ozarski. We hope you join in for that. That starts at 11. Stephen, thank you again. Everyone, thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of the morning.